Tonight on KQED Newsroom, Governor Gavin Newsom's reprieve for death row inmates sparks heated debate, and a college admission scandal rocks the higher education landscape. Also, San Francisco's new public defender shares his goals and priorities for the job. Plus, a new book offers a chilling look at how tech companies are stripping the details of our lives, not only for profit, but for control over our behavior. Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. We begin with two major stories this week. On Wednesday, Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order halting executions for as long as he is in office. California currently has more than 700 inmates on death row, more than any other state. Most are housed at San Quentin. Governor Newsom said he cannot sign off on executing hundreds of human beings, knowing there might be innocent people among them. The decision won praise from anti-death penalty activists, but critics call the move an abuse of power. Meanwhile, in other major developments this week, a number of Californians, including actresses and prominent business figures, are among the more than 40 people charged in a widespread college admission scam. Parents allegedly bribed athletic coaches or paid people to help cheat on college entrance exams to get their kids into top schools. Joining us now to discuss these stories are Scott Shafer, KQED senior editor of California Politics and Government, Republican political consultant Sean Walsh of Wilson Walsh Consulting, and Jill Tucker, San Francisco Chronicle education reporter. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Jill, the college admissions scandal has roots here in Northern California. The bribes, many of them were funneled through a nonprofit called Key Worldwide Foundation based in Sacramento. Can you tell us what happened with the $20 million that foundation took in? Where did it go?
$25 million. It went not toward nonprofit goodwill and programs for underprivileged kids as the nonprofit claimed. It actually went funneled to coaches and other people at universities to help wealthy and actresses, doctors, CEOs get their kids into the college of their choice. And you looked through the tax documents. You know, for example, one said that it made donations to Palo Alto's Friends of Cambodia. Yes, and those folks have said, we've never heard of these people, and we certainly have never gotten a dime. So far, we haven't identified really any of this money funneling toward charitable causes or helping disadvantaged youth. It seems that pretty much all of that money helped advantaged youth and their parents and the people like Mr. Singer, who was arrested and pleaded guilty.
Yeah, not to mention their parents got a tax break from it, right? Is this just the tip of the iceberg, do you think, Sean, or can we expect to see more investigations involving additional colleges and universities?
I think it's the tip of the iceberg. I do think you're going to see more issues. This was just around Mr. Singer. The professional college admissions business is big bucks. People are terrified. UCLA had almost 130,000 applicants for 14,000 slots. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo had 65,000 applicants for 4,000 slots. Parents are freaking out. Our kids right now are waiting for letters in the mail right now.
You both have seniors.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a war. So when you hear a kid's not getting into Cal or UCLA with a 4.3 GPA, parents freak out, and then they apply to 20 different schools. And it is a self-fulfilling, self-whipping up issue. And this is why it has touched on millions of Americans.
You say it's a war, but I mean, a lot of parents don't have any artillery to fight that war, right? And I think that's part of the issue here.
That's exactly right, Scott. So, and in a way, it is creating a level of parents who do have means, who hire professional SAT coaches, who hire professional interview coaches when they go and do these interviews. And so in a way, you know, it's not that far of a step away from, it's legal, but from hiring somebody to take your test as opposed to helping your kid get the test. And poor kids really do suffer for this because they can't afford it.
Well, and I think that's the thing, is that these advantaged families still had an advantage when these kids were going. They had all the best schools, the best tutors, the best test prep. That wasn't good enough for these families in this sort of fired up rat race to get into college. And so, you know, they wanted a guarantee.
And there's already some political fallout from this, right, Scott? Senator Ron Wyden, he's the top Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee, has said he will propose federal legislation to end tax breaks for college donations both before and while the donor's child is enrolled. How else might this play out politically, especially in the presidential election?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're already seeing the Democratic Party going to the left on a lot of income inequality issues. I think this is going to give encouragement to people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, maybe even Kamala Harris, to talk about increasing taxes on corporations, on wealthy individuals. And here in California, that's already happened to a certain extent, but it's going to, I think, really, I think people are going to see this issue of inequality maybe in a different way, because this is such an easy to understand issue.
And it affects so many people
and it's
directly.
So offensive.
It's so offensive
to everyone across the spectrum.
And you have to think too that, is this really about the kids or is it about the parents? I mean, do the parents need to have the Yale sticker on their back of their car, and when they go to their social clubs, be able to say where their kids go to school? I mean, a lot of these kids didn't even know, right? That this was happening.
Well, they better hope they didn't know.
Well, yeah. And what does it say about us as a society, right, in terms of the inequities that exist out there? Because this is something, as you pointed out, the parents who have money to pay, it further perpetuates the inequities we're seeing. So how do we even go about resolving some of the root causes of this?
So let me raise this. So actually, colleges now, like Stanford, are getting offers of $100 million donations from tech CEOs, and the universities are turning them down on that. So I think actually these billionaires said, you know what, I can't buy a building anymore, so I got to buy a coach. So for $500,000, I can get my kid into UCLA or USC, as opposed to $100 million. So in a way, it's a bargain. I just think where there's a will and there's cash, there's a way.
I think those large donations are still getting kids into college.
But how do we start to level out the playing field?
Yeah. And I think, there are a lot of programs out there for these kids. I talked to a young woman today. She applied to more than 20 schools. She started prepping for the SAT when she was a freshman through a nonprofit program. She has worked so hard and to get in with low-income family, public school. And she was deeply offended by this, but she's getting offers into college because she worked really, really hard and was supported by these programs and by these folks in the communities that are working with these students to get them in.
And I think it's ironic, too, a couple things. One, the outsized influence of sports and athletics. I mean, these were not top-tier sports. We're talking about the sailing club and polo. I play water polo, but, it's not a top-tier sport. Lacrosse. So that's, I think, one issue. And then also affirmative action. I think there are a lot of families, kids, where they're the first in their family to go to school. They're, from working-class families or people of color, immigrants, and they get to these schools and they feel like they don't belong because they didn't earn it, and it's so ironic.
And also it might not be the right fit for them. It's what their parents wanted for them, but it might not be the right fit for them. And is there any evidence that attending America's most selective colleges will lead to higher salaries down the line or personal happiness eventually?
I think it matters a whole lot probably for somebody who comes from a working class family than it does from some of these kids in these families, because they already have a lot of advantages. I'm not sure there's really, what's the added value, of going to a top-notch school.
And I think it is, it's the connections, it's getting hired. If you're a Yale graduate, you're gonna take a look at, Yale graduates coming up behind you. I think that networking does definitely help these young people.
But there are studies, though, that show that there isn't a lot of correlation between the selective school that you go to and the money and the eventual happiness. And there are also studies that show, for example, that only a very small percentage of the top 100 U.S. companies are run by CEOs who graduated from Ivy League schools.
Well, I will tell you, so I worked in the Reagan and Bush White Houses and the top echelons of government, at least in the past. If you've got a Yale, a Princeton, or a Harvard pedigree, you're usually an assistant secretary of state or an assistant secretary of defense. There is an advantage to those schools
in politics and at the Supreme Court. So we've seen that. Okay, I have to move on to the death penalty now, Scott, because that's the other big story this week. Governor Newsom imposing a moratorium on the death penalty, despite the fact that California voters have repeatedly upheld the death penalty and in 2016 sped up executions, voted for that. So Newsom had promised during his campaign to honor the will of the voters. What happened?
Well, I think obviously he feels deeply about this issue. He has had, I think in his career, we saw this with same-sex marriage. there was a law in the books forbidding it. He went ahead and broke the law, essentially, as mayor, and he got reeled in by the courts. But I think for him, he was looking at the reality of within the next few months having to sign off on the lethal injection protocol. And once that was approved, there were 25 people on death row whose appeals had been exhausted. And so he was going to have to be signing these death warrants. And I think he just personally didn't want to do that. Now, he's not the first politician to do something a little different than he said he would when he got into office. On the other hand, this was never a top layer issue in the gubernatorial campaign. So, and he has been against capital punishment for a long time. So it's not a shock. However, I'm sure if you're one of these families, the crime victim families, you're very unhappy.
I wonder I wonder if the fact that it's a reprieve, so this isn't permanent, the next governor could come in and take that away. So does that give him a little political cover to basically just say, look, this is during my term, I'm giving this reprieve?
Well, yeah, it could. I mean, the reality is the leading cause of death on death row is old age. I mean, these inmates are getting old. They're in their 60s and 70s, a lot of them. And yeah, it's hard to imagine, given where the politics of California are going, that the next governor is going to be tougher on capital punishment. And the question might be on the 2020 ballot. There's already a move to do that.
And Sean, I want to make sure I get you in here because you were part of former Republican Governor Pete Wilson's administration and worked on crafting death penalty policy during that time. What do you think of Governor Newsom's move?
Well, I think Governor Newsom is acting a lot like Donald Trump. I support same-sex marriage, absolutely. I'm glad that it went through the U.S. Supreme Court and it's the law of the land. But you can't simply take the law in your own hands and do what you want to do. He's done this with the same-sex marriage issue. He's now done this with the death penalty issue. What if a governor came in and said, you know what, a fetus is viable after 24 weeks or 27 weeks, so I am going to put a moratorium on any abortions in the state of California after 24 weeks.
But the Constitution gives him the authority to do
But Scott, what I'm saying is it basically sends a message that the executive ignores the law of the land. And I will tell you, on this issue, the death penalty, I have found this to be probably the most dishonest public policy debate that happens. There are people who absolutely heartfelt, morally believe that it is wrong on the death penalty issue and will do anything to stop that. And so you've seen this time and time again in the state of California where either the Ninth Circuit judges are very passionate about this or advocates are very passionate about this. They thwart it. Finally, the U.S. Supreme Court yelled back to the Ninth Circuit, stop this. You're abusing the justice system. So every time it's been thwarted, it's come back by the voters and done this. And so once again, not only did we had a repeal of the death penalty and we had a support of the death penalty on the ballot, and people rejected the repeal and supported
It's true, but the trend line has been clear. The support for capital punishment has been going down for decades.
As in the case of same-sex marriage, situation that you brought up earlier. So then that raises the question that sometimes maybe a public policy statement of this nature, it takes a while for public opinion and the courts to catch up, because we saw same-sex marriage eventually become the law of the land.
Well, I would argue from a public policy perspective, when the governor went out and, again, used selective facts. So it cost, billions of dollars to do these death penalty cases. Yes, it does cost more. You'd think that people were putting death penalty issues out on a daily basis. They're in the state of California on an annual basis. It's fluctuated over the past 20 years between 2,500 people who committed murders every year to 1,800. Of those cases, it's been between 8 and 20 that have actually been given the death penalty. It is a very, very important public policy tool for prosecutors to use to generally clear cases.
But he's not the first
money.
governor to issue a moratorium. I mean, there are other governors on the West Coast, and I think 20 states now have banned capital punishment. So he's not the first.
And I wonder if there's enough support for the death penalty to create a groundswell to recall him. I don't know.
We have to leave it there. Jill Tucker with the San Francisco Chronicle, Scott Shafer with KQED, and also Sean Walsh. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Now to local politics. On Monday, San Francisco Mayor London Breed appointed Manohar Raju to serve as San Francisco's next public defender. He will replace Jeff Adachi, who helmed the public defender's office since 2003 until his abrupt death last month at age 59. Raju has been with the public defender's office for 11 years and had been managing its felony division. In a statement, Mayor Breed praised Raju for his, quote, commitment to justice and equity and for continuing Adachi's legacy. Joining me now is Mano Raju. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on your new position. How are you feeling?
It's a lot in a short amount of time, but the office has really been wonderful in their support of me and direction and continuing Jeff's legacy and hopefully expanding upon it. And a lot of people from the community have been really positive about this development, so I'm excited to move in a new direction.
And what would that new direction be? What will be your priorities?
Well, when I say new direction, Jeff was someone who was always believed in a growth mindset. So he always tried to really grow a tremendous staff within our office and engage with the community. So the first thing I need to do is to meet with all of the other units in our office. I've been the felony manager for the last 3 or 4 years. But we have so many units: an immigration unit, a misdemeanor unit, a juvenile unit, strong investigation and paralegal staff. So it's really about gathering information, seeing how we can improve each and every unit within the office to best serve the citizens of San Francisco.
And your predecessor, Jeff Adachi, was known for work that went beyond the stated duties of the Public Defender's Office. He was a very passionate advocate for criminal justice reform in California, for pension reform in San Francisco. Are there certain issues beyond the walls of the Public Defender's Office that really speak to you, that you plan to be a vocal advocate for?
Yes, there are many areas, but just to go over a couple, there's increasing evidence that the brain is not fully developed until ages of 23 or 24 years old. And yet we're still treating youth as people who have fully formed brains. So expanding young adult court in areas where we can move young people into areas rather than incarceration of further rehabilitation if there was a crime committed, and moving in a positive direction so people can move into either the educational or job force areas without convictions on their records.
And you're also a founding member of the group Public Defenders for Racial Justice, and I would imagine what you're talking about kind of ties into that as well. This is a group that advocates for selecting juries that are more representative of the communities that they come from, that they're chosen from. How does the issue of race play out today when you're defending your clients?
It plays out in so many ways. To give you a quick example, there was a trial that I was doing, and a juror said, "Listen, I don't think I don't want to be on this jury because it doesn't look fair to this jury because your client's a young African-American young man from the Bayview, and there's no one who looks like him on this jury, and there's no one from the Bayview on this jury. I don't see how we can give this young man a fair trial." And the whole audience started clapping in that moment. So I think the residents of San Francisco are aware that we need greater diversity on our jurors and a jury that more adequately reflects the community, and so that our clients can get a fair cross-section of the community on their juries.
And so what are some of the ways that you would go about accomplishing that?
Well, the first thing is to actually collect the data to find out who is actually coming into the jury room. So we're going to ask the jury commissioner, and there's actually an initiative statewide that is pending now, but hopefully we can push through to have jury commissioners collect the data. Once they collect the data, then we can do more to see how we can get fair juries.
I wanted to ask you about something else as well. Your predecessor, Jeff Adachi, had a tense relationship with the San Francisco Police Department. There have been leaked reports about his death. This week, the San Francisco Police Officers Union cut ties with its former president after he made inflammatory remarks about Adachi's death on his Facebook site. Are you concerned about that adversarial relationship, and how would you go about addressing it?
The adversarial relationship is something that the American criminal legal system is founded upon. So you want a public defender's office, and you want public defenders who are confident and comfortable vigorously examining police officers.
But this seems to go far beyond just your standard adversarial relationship that is rooted in how our legal system is structured, right? It seems very personal. How would you go about fixing that and mending fences?
Well, I just actually met with Chief Scott. I've seen him on 2 occasions. He's looking forward to sitting down, and I hope to continue conversations with him. But at the same time, Chief Scott and the residents of San Francisco are interested in reform. So it's important that we collect data on disproportionate arrests for African Americans, for example, in the community, and see if we can actually do some changes that will actually make policing more fair for the residents of San Francisco.
You're the son of immigrants from India. What role does that play in how you approach your legal work?
Well, when you look at the place where my parents come from, it's a village in South India, which is a pretty poor farming community. And my father was able to, because there were a couple people in that community who believed in him, really achieve heights in education. And I think that's one of the same things we should be trying to do with our clients, to really look at what their potential is. And secondly, some of the disparities that we have within San Francisco. In some ways, we have 2 San Franciscos when you look at some of the conditions and some of the housing projects. and we have skyrocketing real estate, incredible wealth in the city. And that, what we have internally in the city also plays out globally when you look at some third world countries like India in comparison to the United States.
So it does inform your work in that way.
Yes, it does.
Mano Raju, the new public defender in San Francisco, we wish you all the best in your new job. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We turn our attention now to a bold view of how tech companies are trying to control every aspect of our lives for profit. From smartwatches to social media posts to even the words we speak at home, tech companies are capturing all that data, then analyzing, bundling, and reselling it to third parties. The companies aren't merely mining the intimate details of our lives, they're trying to shape and control them. That's the contention in Harvard business professor Shoshana Zuboff's new book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And Shoshana Zuboff joins us now in the studio. Nice to have you here.
So glad to be here with you, Tui.
You coined the term surveillance capitalism. Can you explain to us what it is?
Yes. Surveillance capitalism, birthed in the 21st century in the digital era. Other eras of capitalism have evolved this way. They claim things that live outside the market dynamic, bring them into the marketplace to be able to be sold and purchased. So, for example, industrial capitalism took nature, brought it into the market dynamic, and sold it as real estate, as land.
How is surveillance capitalism different from the normal free market capitalism that we've become accustomed to?
All right, so surveillance capitalism took an unexpected and darker twist. It claims private human experience for the market dynamic. It brings it into the marketplace, translates it into behavioral data, which are then sold in new kinds of marketplaces to business customers who want to lay bets on what we will do in the future.
So in your book, you cite the game Pokemon Go as an example of this. I think that's something that will illustrate this in a way people can understand. How did Pokemon Go modify our behavior?
Eventually, surveillance capitalists understood that the best predictive data comes from intervening in our behavior and actually shaping and herding and tuning us toward its objectives.
And so Pokemon Go did that by saying, hey, if you go to these business establishments, you can see Pokemon characters there, leading people to businesses that they may never have visited in the first place.
That's right. It established these futures markets in human behavior with a whole range of service providers, restaurant, bars, place to get your tires changed, whatever it may be. And these establishments paid Pokemon Go for guaranteed footfall. So just like in the online world, the advertisers would pay Google or Facebook for click-through rates. Now we're out in the real world, in our real lives, where, of course, we will spend money.
In your book, it's nearly 700 pages long. You lay out the case in great detail and very chilling detail. You compare this to elephant poaching. That is, the tech companies, in this case, are taking our raw human behavioral material, stripping that, and then we're the leftover carcasses. Very chilling comparison there.
Chilling comparison.
But companies like Facebook will say that they are not selling your personal information. Is that just a matter of semantics?
You can call it semantics. Orwell would have called it euphemism. You know, the idea that you disguise what you're really doing with clever language that leads you to make different kinds of conclusions. What's really happening here is we are the source of raw material for surveillance capitalism's supply chains, production processes, and sales. And what they're selling is bets on our future behavior.
So what do you think needs to happen to try to fix this situation?
Number one, a change in public opinion, a sea change, which I believe is already underway. We need new law, new regulations that will specifically interrupt and outlaw these unprecedented activities of surveillance capitalism. Number two, we need new forms of collective action. This can't be the burden of individuals. We need to come together, recognizing our shared interests, to pressure democracy to make changes. Number three, we have an opportunity for competitive solutions. The companies that decide to come into this space and offer us the digital the way we want it, empowering, democratizing, those companies stand to have every single person on earth as their customer, because none of us want surveillance capitalism.
You know, I know a lot of people who say they're worried about technology and data, and yet they go out and they buy something like Alexa, the personal assistant for their homes, and they say they're okay with that because they like the convenience. So there seems to be there's this disconnect between what they say they're worried about and what they do. What would you say to them?
You know, scholars call this the privacy paradox. We say one thing, we do another. But in fact, what we understand is that when you actually reveal to people what's going on behind the veil, backstage, nobody wants anything to do with it. The problem today is that most of us can't participate effectively in our daily lives without moving through the digital medium and these supply chains that lead right into surveillance capitalism's factories. So surveillance capitalism has amassed a tremendous amount of wealth. A lot of that wealth is directed to engineering these systems to keep us in ignorance. They are designed to be hidden. They are designed to be secret. So it's very hard for us to be cognizant. Even just a couple of weeks ago, Pew Research, has a story about Facebook users who have no idea the way in which Facebook is categorizing them to feed them to advertisers. Even today, people are surprised and ignorant about what's going on. The answer lies not just in the individual's action. It's intolerable that we should be asked to give up the digital, its utilities, its conveniences, its information, for the sake of protecting ourselves from these pernicious activities. What we really want to do is discover our shared interests and begin to join together in the kinds of political and social action that will ultimately make a difference. New law, new regulation.
If this tide of so-called surveillance capitalism is not tamed, what do you fear will happen?
What I fear will happen is an assault on democracy. The kind of future that we'd be heading toward is very different from the future that we want. First of all, instead of democracy, we have computational truth. Instead of society, we have population statistics. Instead of human autonomy, we have people who are tuned and herded, rewarded and punished to move in certain ways toward the guaranteed outcomes that the owners of these systems desire. And it is against the very nature of the free and autonomous individual.
All right, Shoshana Zuboff, your new book is The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Twee.
And that will do it for us. For more of our coverage online, you can go to kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Twee Vu. Thank you for watching.